Hi everyone, good morning. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing on Wednesday, the 29th of November. It's me and Jonny McFarlane here to talk all things Rangers. This morning, we're going to, in particular, focus on Ross McCausland's, who, of course, yesterday signed that 4-year contract extension, keeping him at Ibrox until 2027. Remember, today, as we'll touch upon across the show, the Black Friday deal, which we've been telling you about throughout this week, is about to end. If you've not taken up that offer, the best time to join the Rangers Review is now. If you want to support these videos, if you want to keep them going, if you want to keep us here every morning at 9:30, that is the best tangible way to do so. And a big thank you to our sponsors, MPH Group, for bringing you the podcast. As ever, Jonny, how's it going? It's been a while. How are you getting on, and what's new?
Well, I wish I could say I was great, but I'm full of the cold, which you could probably tell from the tenor of my voice. And unfortunately, it means I'm going to miss the game tomorrow night, which I was planning to attend. But I don't really fancy being in a really, really crowded, packed press room full of guys and giving everyone what I've got, which is pretty nasty. So yeah, I'm okay. I'm not dying. It's a bit of man flu, but I could have done without it, Joshua, because it's the second time I've had it in about 3 weeks.
Not good, not good. Well, we will soldier through. Anyone who was watching last week knows that I had a coughing fit live on air, so it cannot be as that. Jonny, Ross McCausland, kind of known now for maybe about a week or so that he would sign this contract. Last night, it was made official by Rangers. I'll read you what he had to say. He said, "I'm really pleased to have agreed this new deal. It's no secret I'm a massive Rangers supporter, and there's no doubt in my mind I want to commit my future here for the long term. I'm extremely grateful to the new manager for giving me an opportunity in recent weeks. I want to repay him and everyone at the club with my performances on the pitch in the years to come." And Philippe Clement added, "I'm really pleased with the progress Ross has made in recent weeks. He's deserving of this new contract. I've been clear that young players will be given an opportunity at this club if they show the right qualities and work ethic. Ross has done that. Ross is a talented young player, and I think it's an important step from the club to secure his future here." Jonny, I mean, there was noises of interest from elsewhere, which I think was natural. When Derek and I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, we also touched upon the fact that the contract that McCausland may well have signed 2-3 months ago, or the offer that maybe have been on the table would likely have changed because his asset, his kind of standing as an asset would have changed after making those appearances in the Rangers first team. Good news all round, though. I think it addresses a bit of a need in the squad. It's a brilliant deal for him, especially the kind of the stature where he was in the overall stature of things at the start of the season. And I'm sure it's one that will excite supporters because they've really enjoyed watching Ross McCausland so far.
Well, first of all, you have to say that this is a position that Rangers have struggled to fill since Daniel 𝐁𝐤𝐿 left. Right side of midfield, whether that be as a winger or a more conventional right midfielder. And it may be that all along the right guy was sitting there and succession of managers just haven't quite rated him. It's an interesting one, Josh, because I've seen quite a bit of young Ross McCausland as a youth player. I always felt like he was a bit of a sort of low-budget Stephen Naismith. Didn't think he was particularly creative or could sort of beat a man, but really worked hard, took up good positions and was a good finisher. But since coming out of the first team, it's like he's a different player. I don't know if it's like the confidence or just being around better players. And we know, and I've heard so many managers and players say that better players get better around better players.
Yeah.
But some of the things that he's done since he's come on as a sub, he's shown real personality to grab games by the scruff of the throat and make an impact. And we've seen players that have cost fortunes this season who haven't been able to do that with substitute appearances or even starts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important that you have to get this lad tied down. He's clearly a better player than some people thought. I don't think it's unfair to say that he was on his way out under the previous management. You know, you tend not to let your best starlets run down their contract to this level if you think they've got a long-term future, do you? So I may be wrong about that. There may be something, but you know, looking at it from the outside in, it doesn't look like he was particularly considered part of the first team under Michael Beale. He didn't even get in the squad once in the league, certainly. So I think it's a great deal to tie him down. You've got a guy there who knows the club, who loves the club. I think he'll classify obviously as homegrown because although he's Northern Irish, he'll come through. He's come through the ranks in Scotland for more than 5 years. So it's an absolute no-brainer, and hopefully he can go on to become a really, really excellent player for the club. Because one thing that the Rangers need, they need more British players coming through who understand what it's all about and bleed for the jersey. And I don't mind if those players are squad members or first teamers. They obviously need to be good enough to be part of that starting 11. They need to prove it, but it needs to have that British core Rangers for me all the time. Now, Josh, you may be sitting there thinking that's anachronistic, but I don't think so.
Yeah, well, we'll get on to that because it's an interesting point. My overall feeling would be that, give yourself the best chance for the best players, but I do know what you're saying, so we'll come back to that. I want to touch first on what you're saying there about the fact that at the start of the season, if you'd said McCausland would be signing a 4-year contract until 2027 with a lot of excitement, I think people would have been surprised, and that's not to play down his quality at all, because I agree with you. I think he's taken his chance really well, but I think it's more an observation of the fact that football is about taking your opportunities. Ross McCausland, we don't know if he'd have got an opportunity under Beale, but he certainly wouldn't have played in his most comfortable position, even if he can play in more central positions. He's been able to get his opportunity because the new managers come in. He's wanted to play with wide men on either side of variations of a 4-man midfield, and he's looked at Ross McCausland and he's handed him an opportunity. But I think crucially, Jonny, he's taken it. He could have come on in substitute appearances, and he's come on in difficult moments in games, holding on to a lead in the Europa League against Sparta for the last kind of 10 minutes with a 1-goal lead. He came on, obviously, when Rangers were 1-0 down against Hearts at home. In that Ibrox game, they came back to win, and as anyone who was there that day knows, that's not an easy environment to come into and try things and be forward and be positive. So before we maybe talk about specifics of what he has offered as a player, I think it's probably an important point to note that being a young player, I guess, is all about taking your opportunity, and Ross McCausland has done that. When he's come onto the game, he's been confident, he's played with his head up, he's played forward. I think what I like about him as a player is, on the right, he can go 2 ways because he can go down the line, but also he can play with his head up and find those passes with his left foot to the far side of the pitch, which we saw when he came off the bench against Sparta Prague. And then a start against Livingston as well, he was one of, if not Rangers' best players. But I think that's an important point, Jonny. It's not just a case of he's had this. Yes, he's had an opportunity, and yes, he's probably been fortunate in the way that the new managers come in and played a style that suits him. But he's taken that opportunity really well, and very quickly from kind of being not in the conversation about who's going to maybe break through, who's going to be your answer in certain positions, he's really come to the forefront. I think that's a testament to the fact that he has taken his opportunity when it's arisen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all. I mean, I totally agree with everything you've just said there. It's very, very difficult when you're a young player to make any kind of an impact on the Rangers team. One thing I would say that I think is quite interesting, Josh, right? Sometimes a foreign manager can see things in players that others don't. Now, there's no doubt Walter Smith thought Barrie Ferguson was a talented player, but there's a big question mark over whether Barrie would have made it under Walter Smith if Walter had stayed on, because there was a lot of stuff going around at the time about Barrie being on the verge of a move to Dundee United for 100 grand, and other clubs sniffing around because Barrie wasn't really getting a chance. Dick Advocat came in and took one look at the youth team and watched all the videos and said, "This is the guy I'm building my team round." And it was interesting the way Clément's talked about McCausland. He's been extremely positive, and Clément's not the kind of guy that'll over-egg a pudding. In my experience of dealing with him, and I've dealt with him a lot so far, you're not really getting that impression that he's going to big up someone. And I wouldn't go as far as to say he's even bigged up McCausland, but I would say he's been a little bit more enthusiastic than normal.
Yeah, agreed.
And it's clear that he thinks McCausland's a talent. It's clear that he thinks he's going to be a big part of the team going forward. You know, he suggested that very, very much he's the kind of only player that he's seen in the academy that's first team ready. But even that in and of itself is he's basically saying McCausland's oven ready to go in for the full season. And sometimes you just need a foreign coach to come in and be like, nah, your perceptions are wrong about these guys.
Well, I think you see if you look at that Hearts game, Jonny, the last 20 minutes, I don't know. It does, I don't know, just about under Michael Beale, but when Rangers are chasing the lead, how many managers throw in a young player who's maybe had 2-3 substitute appearances to his name in that type of environment? So that probably told you there what he thought about him. And I think also what's interesting is, you see, after he came back, he spoke about him before he'd signed his contract, and he made a point of saying, look, I don't normally speak about players until the pen is on the paper or something like that. But effectively, I think he was quite confident that Ross McCausland would want to sign, because for obvious reasons, he would want to commit his future to Ibrox. But he also said after he came back, I think this was after the game, it was maybe the press conference before the game against Aberdeen, he said that, he's made his full debut, he's had a man of the match performance, should have had that goal. And he's went away and made his international debut and effectively made the comment like he's come back the same guy, grounded, and Clement was very happy with that. One of the key things when you speak to people about Philippe Clement, the key things he wants is focus. He always speaks about players. Will they remember the story when they've gone away for 10 days in international break and they come back into the collective at Rangers? So it's clear, Jonny, that not only does he obviously think, okay, he's good enough, but he also thinks he's got a mature enough head to come in and deal with what has probably been quite a life-changing few weeks, in all honesty, going from, again, making that step up to 21s at a club level, but then also going and making, your full debut for your country as well.
Josh, I don't know what's going on with you, but it's like your mic is on a loose topping, so there's quite a lot of sort of noise as if you're tapping the table or something like that. I don't know what it is. Maybe you're using the mic.
We'll go without it. We'll go through the laptop. But how's that? Am I sounding fresher now?
Yes, just don't tap your table or touch your table because it's coming through quite hard. So I've now completely forgotten your question, which is typical.
Mentality. Mentality. You need the. I think clearly, again, to look at what he's maybe offered Rangers on the right-hand side so far, a natural right-sided option, yes. He can kind of go two ways on the wing. And I think that's an underrated topic when you talk about wingers. If you play Rabbi Matondo on the right, I think he can only really go on the right-hand side. He's not as comfortable moving in and playing those passes on his left foot. Whereas you see at the weekend, when he plays wide on the left, not only is he really dangerous chopping inside, but he earns the corner by hitting the byline for Rangers, and then he creates that late chance for Sam Lammers by hitting the byline. I think when you play Todd Cantwell on the right, again, it sometimes limits the angles he can play at, but McCausland gives you that nice variation where he can go up the wing, but he can move inside as well. He plays with his head up, and he's not electric. He's not someone who you think he's always going to outpace people. He looks like quite a clever player as well. So, but aside from all the qualities that I think he's shown so far, Jonny, and it is early, but he's taken that opportunity. That topic of mentality is clearly important to Clement, that he can go away and have that week where his world probably changes quite dramatically, but he remains grounded. And as Clement said, he comes back focused and not changed from what must be a pretty significant week.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to something I was going to say that I forgot I was going to say. Okay. So just talking about the Clement seeing something in McCausland that other people hadn't.
Yeah,
I don't know about you, right? I've talked to people at Rangers about Lewis Ferguson, and the thing that I always got back about Lewis Ferguson was, look, Lewis was here as a kid. He didn't set the header on fire. We're not looking at Lewis Ferguson. We've never. All this is just paper talk. We're not interested. And you look at what Lewis Ferguson's done now for Bologna. It's one of the highest contributing players in the whole league for goal contributions. There's talk of Juventus and other clubs sniffing around looking to prize him away, and it'll be minimum £20 million to get Lewis Ferguson for those clubs now. And I think a lot of that has been about perception.
Yeah,
like they have a fixed perception. Well, no, we've made a decision on this, and we're not willing to change. And that happens in every walk of life and every business, Josh. It happens in journalism. You work with someone 5 years and you go and you think, I wouldn't want to work with him again. 5 years later, maybe a completely different person, You get in your head a fixed idea of what someone can do. And I think that's why having someone like Clement come in, who just looks at it completely fresh, and I hope, and this is the point that I wanted to come into with using this example, I hope Clement can do that with the league, Josh.
Mm.
And there might be players there in that league that he can snap up, that he sees something in that just we don't, that or we haven't necessarily thought they might be Rangers class, but there might be like little rich pickings that he can make. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know any of those players, but that's my point, is that he will know maybe, and because he's seen things that I won't, because it's a completely fresh, non-biased, non-judgmental take on what the environment is around them. I do think it's interesting, also getting back to that point about what he said about McCausland being the only one, because Bailey Rice obviously had made a bit of an impact in the first team prior to Michael Beale getting the boot. And I think we all thought Bailey Rice is looking like the most likely to come through. And for me, like seeing Bailey Rice in the youth team, it just seems absolutely obvious. Like it's neck on the line. I think Bailey Rice will make it, provided he continues to work hard. Because talent gets you nowhere if you don't work hard. But in terms of class, there's no doubt. So I was a bit surprised Clement saying that, but maybe there's other factors at play.
Bailey Rice is also he is what, still just turned 17. So it's like there's not a rush on it, is there?
No, there isn't. You're right about that. But sometimes I think we're a bit nervous about blooding younger players here. I mean, McCausland's like 21, isn't he? So
20,
yeah. So that's not exactly a young player, really. I mean, there's a lot of 20-year-olds who've had 3 or 4 years experience. It's very rare for a player that age to come into Rangers. We all know about the story of Derek Johnson coming in at that age, but he's not joined by too many others who have come through at that age and made an impact. And I suppose, listen, if you look at football in general, Wayne Rooney's the other one that obviously was a phenomenal talent and just could not be denied, and came in at that age and because of his physicality looked like a man. But you would hope that Bailey Rice will get an opportunity either on loan or down the line, whatever they think's best for him. The other one that I think will be probably a little bit peeved to hear that will probably be Leon King, who might be entitled to turn around and say, well, I've played X amount of games in the Champions League, so I do feel like I'm ready for first team football as a fourth choice central defender, and pushing to get to third and then pushing to get into the team. But I think it's fairly clear now that that's now a couple of managers that haven't quite been so convinced by Leon King as Giovanni van Bronckhorst was. We know that Dutch coaches tend to like their ball-playing centre-backs, so that may have been a kind of natural, just something that ticked the boxes for Gio in a way that it doesn't for these next two. But I've kind of felt with Leon King, having watched him quite a lot, I've discussed this with Craig Mulholland actually as well, as I've always had a wee sneaky that Leon King's best position might be central midfield in a holding role, as opposed to a centre half, because I think he's 5'11".
Yeah, he's not huge. He's not huge.
I think that's a real impediment to top level elite football nowadays, in defence. And he's just such a good ball player, Leon King. So I think in there that would be a better fit for him. But for example, Craig Mulholland completely disagreed with that. He felt that's been a discussion that's been going on in the academy for a long time. And he said, no, we think Leon King, because of the change in the use of centre-backs that we're seeing across Europe, especially at the elite level, because of his use of the ball, we think centre-half is where he needs to be. Yeah,
I think it's true. I think Scotland probably still, when you go away from home, you see this Aberdeen at the weekend as well. I'm not I'm not. Football's played more on the ground than ever before, but then also you see the return of big physical number nines, maybe in response to that, and it kind of just works in cycles, doesn't it, football? So I don't know, when you're going away to a game like the weekend, and it's the same for, I think Ben Davies probably plays on Thursday night. I think the European game sometimes suits him more because it's on the ground, it's about reading the game. Whereas when it's about physical 1v1 duels, he's not going to be as good at that as Leon Balogun is, because that's the kind of environment in which Balogun thrives. So you need Rangers don't have a player in that left centre back position. Touching on Leon King as well, who can play across a range of different games in the way that they feel 𝐁𝐥𝐤 can, which is, they've been in that position for quite a number of years now, and a continuation of that moving forward. Jonny, I want to talk about you get your thoughts on the game of the weekend, just kind of following on from that. We've had lots of pieces on the website, and I should mention as well that Chris has got a brilliant piece which we've republished at the top of the website, which tells the story of Ross McCausland's journey to Rangers with ex-coaches, insight you won't get elsewhere. It tells a story of how he prepared this summer for what he knew would be a make or break season for him, now 20 years old, if he was going to make it at Ibrox or not. Some fantastic insights in there, as I say, with coaches who've worked with him as a young kid right up until a teenager, coming over from Linfield to Rangers a few years ago. So we'd encourage people to go read that. It's in the comment section. And of course, if you've not signed up to the website, Black Friday deal, £12 for a year, and you'll get content like that every single day. One of the other pieces of content we've got is rewatching the game, as well as a kind of a larger colour piece, Jonny, looking at the Clément's claims about the expected goals as well. Watching the game back, I felt that the maturity that this Rangers side maybe have never had is not so much that I think they responded better than they maybe would have. I thought they were able to create that kind of they were able to box Aberdeen in from about 50 minutes onwards, whereas I think in the past you'd have seen them not really have that intensity, that siege mentality to score up until 70 or 80 minutes. I think the maturity or maybe the element of this team that we've not seen is that they ended this game and they played it like a must-win from an earlier time in the game, but they didn't start it like a must-win, which put them in that really difficult position. One of the things that we picked apart in that piece when we were rewatching the game was how the defence struggled early on and why that maybe was. I mean, just your overall thoughts on the game. I kind of think that Rangers did do enough to win, but there's not enough trust being built up in these types of games for people to feel that even if they had sufficient chance quality, even if they had enough time in the opposition half, they were going to be able to do it. I mean, what did you kind of think of it overall? Because although, as mentioned, Rangers didn't drop any ground this weekend, and over the course, if you said, okay, Philippe Clément, he starts 7 points behind, if he can keep that to something like 5 going to Parkhead, then he gives himself a good chance. I think perspective-wise, people would have thought, okay, that's a decent job. But obviously a frustrating weekend in isolation. So what do you think about that overall? And I guess just the game.
So I'll tell you what I think, right? I'm trying to be as balanced as possible here. In context of the season, it's a nightmare result, right? Mm-hmm. But if you take away Michael Beale and you just look at Philippe Clément and you look at the performance and the performances that under Philippe Clément, I think you can put it down to bad luck. Mm-hmm. Rangers have created a number of chances. Sam Lammers has got to score. I know that XG doesn't probably tell you that, but
I don't think he's got to score. I think he's got to do better, but I don't think that's as good. I think he should be better.
Free header 6 yards out.
Yeah, I think it's people, understandably, because he started badly, really badly overall. I think it's people. It's a bit more confirmation bias. I think he should do better, but I don't think he should.
Okay, we don't agree on that, right? But Leon Balogun's got to score.
Yes, that's a much better opportunity. The first one in particular.
So we agree that Danilo's had a number of half chances that you would say probably could have done better with. The
one in the first half, Jonny, where Campbell actually puts it across and Sima kind of sits on his heels. Where that's actually one of the best. Obviously, that doesn't register in XG, but that's one of the best chances of the game, because if he just continues his run, it's an open goal.
Yeah. So listen, if we're talking XG, it's 2.5 or whatever it is. I don't know what StatsBomb was in the end, but it's clear that Rangers created much, much, much more than Aberdeen. Mm-hmm. Aberdeen's goal's rudimentary. It's an embarrassing central defensive mishap.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've done an anatomy of the goal, but it'd be interesting to know what you think about, like, what's Tavernier doing there, like, because he lets the man run off him It looks
Well, I
very,
think
very
it's,
orchestrated.
well, you can read on, there is on the website, but if you look at the reverse angle, Rangers are man marking in midfield and defence. When I think it's, I don't know if it's one of these kind of pre-planned things that Aberdeen have done, because I do think one of Goldson's weaknesses is when he has to defend the space in front of him quickly. So I don't think he's very fast at doing that. Tavernier actually drops off his man, who'd in theory be the wing back in that situation, to provide a little bit more cover. So I think it's actually Goldson's man, because they're going 2v2 up the top, and because Goldson then doesn't match it, obviously there's an unopposed header, and it's a bit of a freak. It's such a good through ball, and it's so perfect, the kind of placement, because it's also just behind Jose Cifuentes, who's man marking, who then can't cover behind to win the header. But I think the issue is also, and the freeze frame show this in the piece, it's Balogun's man, obviously 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐤, but because the header, the header that assists him is kind of in Goldson's vicinity, he kind of stops. But then Goldson, it's over his head, and then both of them are kind of not sidewards facing when 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐤 is sidewards facing to run on. So I agree with you. It was just kind of especially when you go to a place like Pittodrie, and I know Chris wrote a really good column yesterday, which kind of debunked a bit of the myth around these away games, which are made to be such a big deal. Any game away from home in Scotland, you give yourself difficulties if you concede a goal like that.
So I've got a slightly different opinion on this. No one in the comments will be surprised. So I'm about to waiting to get shot down. I hear a lot of people say we shouldn't be playing this Aberdeen thing up. Rangers should be going there and beating them. I think it's the opposite. I think Rangers are not playing it up enough. I think when Rangers go up there or they come to Ibrox, they are 115% of what they normally are. Like they're 15% above. Their levels are top, because the rivalry in Aberdeen, their perception of the rivalry is that it's a huge rivalry. And I think the problem is that Rangers' rivals are Celtic, and they just don't consider Aberdeen a rival. So you saw like the start that Rangers made in this game. The start ruined them. You know, they lose a goal within 15 minutes. They're unlucky. They're lucky that they don't lose two, to be honest, because there's another great chance. I think Rangers need to be aware that they need to be absolutely switched on to these games. The first 15 minutes is going to be a battle no matter what, because they're going to go man for man and try and kill you. And I feel like that's where Rangers got cut out. In that first 15 minutes, they were a bit sleepy. They were a bit dozy. They were a bit like, oh, this is a battle.
Yeah, but I think the point is that you should, in my opinion, you should not play the game. You should match Aberdeen in that regard, but you should not play the game as they want it to be played. How do they want that type of game to be played? They want it to be end-to-end, pretty frenetic. They don't want Rangers to be able to control the ball in midfield, which they couldn't. I think one of Rangers' actual main issues in the game was that because they conceded so early. If you watch the first half to the second half, one of the ways that they were able to gain a bit more territory was Danilo dropping off the front a little bit more central movement from the front three to play closer together, and that in turn allows you to sustain more pressure, and that means that it's not as end-to-end, and that means that you start to get a bit of chances over 20 minutes as opposed to kind of sporadic chances. So I think one of the issues was, for whatever reason, Rangers didn't seem to alter their approach much after they went behind, and I've seen some chat on Twitter about why is Butland going long. The reason he's going long is because I think there's two or three reasons. One, who's getting the ball through the midfield for you? You've not got Nico Raskin to turn and run. No one's going to receive on the half turn. That's not John Lundstrom's game. No one's going to pass the ball really through the lines in that situation. Aberdeen are going man for man, and Rangers, unlike in the past, aren't going to drop a man into the back line as much to create a superiority there and progress the ball forward at a slower pace. So that's kind of a byproduct of the game, but also Rangers' approach. But I do think they weren't able to translate that until the second half, which meant that it did become too scattered. Even if in the first half, I still think, especially that Cantwell chance to see him at the back post, they had opportunities to score.
I don't disagree with a lot of what you've said, but here's what I would say. Tactics don't matter if you don't match the basics. Now, I remember coming on here and talking about this after the 3-0 defeat at Parkhead under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. And it was a game where Rangers didn't do the basics. Yeah. And I think for 15 minutes in this game, Rangers weren't matching their opponent in terms of physicality, in terms of running, in terms of effort, in terms of ferocity. And ultimately that can overcome tactics, especially
Totally.
in Scotland. Especially in Scotland, where referees allow a different interpretation of the rules and the laws of the game than they do in continental countries, which is why you see Rangers, Celtic, Aberdeen, Hearts and Hibs get more yellow and red cards when they go into Europe than they do here, because the players aren't used to the different style of refereeing. So for me, Rangers tactically started to suffocate Aberdeen once they got used to it and they adapted to it after about 15, 16 minutes, basically after the goal. But they were caught cold. So for me, that's the problem in the game. That they looked like they almost, it was like, we're not in a derby match here. And Walter Smith used to say this, right? And Josh, you could sort of put me under the spot and say, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And I'd probably find it quite hard to kind of pull it apart. But he used to always say, at Rangers, you need to win the fight to play your football. And listen, Scottish football hasn't really changed that much since then.
Yeah.
I asked Michael Beale about this, and he said that's still the case when he was there. I said, is that an anachronism now? And he said, no, it's not, because of the style of the football in Scotland. And
yeah, but I mean, Jonny,
Clement
said that. He said, I'm just finding the quote here, but he said, I totally agree with you, because if you don't win duels, and the way I'd see that especially is if you're not able to win the duels, a key point of that game is a 2v2 versus the Rangers centre-backs against Aberdeen centre-forwards, because if you win those duels, you can sustain pressure. If you lose those duels, because you're man for man, suddenly, as we saw in the first 10 minutes, Aberdeen can get through directly and goal. And Clement said in his post-match press conference, the big working point is that for the first 50 minutes, we were not good enough. And I've said that to the team. We were not sharp enough at the start of the game. The moment we started winning the duels after 50 minutes, we started to dominate. So we need to get to that level for 90 minutes. So I totally agree. That was in the piece that I did after the game. It's not that I disagree with this notion that you have to.
I've not been reading much this week.
Yeah, no, obviously, it's nothing I've done. Need to take advantage of the
I've been out. My wife's in Switzerland, and I've been looking after the baby. It's been one man and a baby here.
Yeah. But it's not that I disagree that you have to win the battle, but I think that notion can go too far the other way. But because I think that what you saw for that final minutes is, yes, Rangers won the battle, or they won the duels, or they matched them, or they didn't give Aberdeen an upper hand in that element of the game. But then it was their football that created those opportunities and created kind of sufficient openings. And I think the Balogun header in the first half is the kind of key moment, because it's a really good chance. Broke that down as well in the piece, because I think there's some interesting developments going on with how Clement's trying to work with Barisic. I thought had a really bad second half, but also had some moments in the game where you can see how the kind of new coaching staff is trying to work with him. Rangers they created an opportunity from a attack and throw-in, which I've not seen them do, I think, ever. So that was interesting to see as well. But I agree with you. Over the course of the season, it was a chance to seize the kind of narrative, take initiative, put the pressure on, and they weren't able to do that. And regardless of the kind of stats you look at or the games that are still to come, I still don't think there's the confidence and the trust that this group can do that yet until they do it consistently. But I think we'd probably both agree as well that in isolation of Clement's start, it probably was bad luck. We just don't know what the rest of the season is going to hold, so it's hard to kind of place it. Looking ahead, just briefly before we close up, Jonny, to the game against Aris, and then another home game at the weekend. Is it St Mirren or Dundee this weekend? I think it's St Mirren, isn't it? It is St Mirren. St Mirren, and then Dundee. Then Dundee falls that. Hearts obviously away the Wednesday after. 2 home games for Rangers. 2 good opportunities to play with intensity, as we've seen Clement's team do so far. Take a big step to play in European football after Christmas and get another domestic win. It should be straightforward, relatively straightforward for Rangers in these 2 games. Although St Mirren obviously have been a really good Scottish Premiership side for a couple of seasons now under Stephen Robinson. But in terms of 2 games that you'd want to maybe build a bit of momentum, especially going away to Tynecastle, I think Clement would probably take those 2 coming up.
Yeah, listen, for me, Aris is actually really, really, really important, Josh. They are not as bad a side as what people think. I think this is going to be a tougher game than is widely recognised. If you look at their results in this group, they've not really had a tanking. It's been close for the vast majority of the games, including against Betis. So I think they're, it's almost that traditional Scottish sense of, oh well, they're Diddy's Cyprus, they're hopeless. Luxembourg, they're hopeless. Actually, they're a little bit better than what people are thinking. A bit more experienced in Europe in terms of the way they play. I know they've not, as a club, they've not had a lot of experience in Europe, but just in the way that they knock the ball about and things like that, they're more impressive than I think than people think. And they were able to beat Rangers. Now, Rangers were hopeless, and they just lost a manager. But I think it's really important that this game goes well at Ibrox. I think it will. The crowd will obviously get behind them. But Rangers, as a club, need to be qualifying for the next stage of European competition. It's that simple. Financially, to continue the kudos that it brings, but also for the Scottish football coefficient, because we see, and listen, this is an easy place to have a dig at Celtic for their performances in the Champions League. But the truth is, Celtic and Rangers are both at a stage in the Champions League where just getting there is the prize, because the level of jump in the Champions League is just too much for a Scottish team now. That's just the truth. We saw it with Rangers going up against Napoli and Ajax and Liverpool, and we're seeing it this season with Celtic against Atletico Madrid and Lazio and teams like that, Feyenoord. It's a big jump. So getting through in the Europa League, getting the finances that come with that, and continuing to improve the coefficient so that when Rangers win the league once again, they go into the Champions League automatically. They don't have to face qualifying rounds. I think it's a big deal. So I fully expect a win, but I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as some people are thinking.
No, I totally agree with you. Totally agree. Derek's got another preview coming on that on the members channel as well. Just a couple of comments before we finish. Broxy says, for people who haven't signed up for £12 for 1 year sign up, think of the value. That wouldn't even pay for Derek's electricity for his big light for one morning review. Excellent value. Those who watch consistently will know all about that. George says, having problems changing from 1 month to 12 months. Any help, George? If you send me a DM, a direct message on Twitter, or email me, I will sort that out for you. And just finally as well, Jonathan said, just subscribe for the year. Thank you, Jonathan, and welcome. Just a reminder, folks, the best value you're going to get if you want to support the Rangers review, links are in the description. Easy to subscribe, and you're going to get the most in-depth coverage you'll find for the best value. You will find lots of content on the website as ever at the moment. And Jonny,
just a button on that.
Yeah, go on.
I think maybe a lot of people don't realise we have now got this terrific app, so you don't have to be messing about on your browser looking for passwords and things like that. If you've got the app, you stick it in once, and then it's all there for you, and it's a really nice user experience. It's a really good app. I certainly use it all the time. So.
Not this week. You've not used it this week though, obviously. But apart from this week,
I've been dealing with a child. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah. And Jonny as well. Scott, lots of appreciation for your return in the comments. Scott says, Jonny, good to see you. David says, great to have Jonny back. Sammy says, great to see you on the pod. Jonny, don't be a stranger. And Ross says, Jonny, let's commit to at least one show a week, please. So, Jonny, there's maybe something for you to consider.
I don't like this. I'm used to people being annoyed at me. Come on now.
I know. Well,
I've been taking abuse on Twitter all week for a column I wrote in the Herald saying there is no conspiracy, folks.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to come back on here, to be honest, and get some love after that.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll see you a bit more regularly moving forward. Today's press conference day, Chris will be there. We'll have all your usual coverage as we look ahead to Aris tomorrow. Derek and Chris will be back tomorrow morning. You'll be glad to know Derek in the hosting chair to look after you ahead of the game against Aris at Ibrox. Until then, thanks very much for joining us. We'll speak to you tomorrow.